Let me speak to the ones who've been smiling through storms, the ones who've given their heart only to be handed back to pieces. If you've ever walked on eggshells in your own home, if you've ever been drained by the very people who should have been your safe place, this message is for you. You are not crazy. You are not weak. You're not the villain in a story written by someone who fears your strength. Sometimes God allows the snakes to hiss so you can hear what you were too loyal to see. And the moment you stop explaining yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, that's the moment your healing begins. Today, I'm going to give you 7 powerful strategies to outsmart toxic and manipulative people, not to become like them, but to rise above them, not out of revenge, but out of love, for yourself, for your peace, and for your purpose. Strategy 1, master the power of silence. They say silence speaks louder than words, and when it comes to dealing with toxic and manipulative people, nothing could be truer. Toxic individuals thrive on chaos, on pushing buttons, on watching you explode just so they can point and say, you're the problem. But silence, it confuses them. It takes away their power. See, they're not used to you pausing, breathing, and refusing to react. They expect the same cycle: provoke, manipulate, control. But the moment you choose silence, the game shifts. You're no longer feeding their fire. You're no longer dancing to their dysfunction. Silence becomes your shield. It doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're in control. You're choosing not to waste your voice on someone who only listens to twist your words. You're choosing yourself. You're choosing peace. And in a world that pulls you in 1,000 directions, that choice is the most powerful one you can make. When you stop speaking, you start observing. You begin to see the patterns you missed before, the manipulation hidden in their jokes, the control disguised as concern, the guilt tripping masked as love. Silence clears the noise so truth can rise. Toxic people fear silence because it forces them to sit with themselves, and often they don't like what they find. Your silence becomes a mirror reflecting their own chaos back at them. They squirm, they lash out, they accuse you of being cold or distant. But don't fold, don't fall for the bait. Silence isn't cold, it's calm, it's wise, it's strategic. While they try to pull you into the drama, you remain anchored in your stillness. You observe without absorbing. You learn how they move, how they twist reality, how they use charm as a weapon. And in that awareness, you gain power, the kind of power that doesn't need to shout to be heard. There's a certain dignity in silence that toxic people can't touch. When you refuse to engage in their chaos, they lose access to your energy. And that's what they really crave: your energy, your attention, your reaction. But silence is you reclaiming your energy. It's you saying, not today, not anymore. It's hard, especially when your heart wants to defend itself, to explain, to correct the narrative. But ask yourself, will they really hear you? Or will they just use your words as fuel to twist the story? When you choose silence, you stop giving them ammunition. You stop handing them your piece on a platter. Instead, you protect your space. You protect your sanity. And slowly they realize their tactics don't work on you anymore. That realization weakens them. Your silence becomes your quiet revolution, and they are not invited to the victory. In silence, you begin to rebuild. You reconnect with your inner voice, the one that's been drowned out by the noise of manipulation and deceit. You start hearing your truth again. You start remembering who you were before they tried to break you. And that remembrance is healing. It's sacred. Toxic people often condition you to question yourself, to doubt your worth, to second guess your every move. But silence gives you the space to deprogram that conditioning. You stop responding to the false narratives, and you start affirming your own. You realize you don't need to defend your boundaries. You just need to stand by them. You don't need to prove your goodness to someone committed to misunderstanding you. That's freedom. That's growth. And it all begins in the quiet places where your soul finally feels safe to breathe again. Some of the most powerful moments in life happen in the spaces between words. That's where clarity is born. That's where strength is forged. Toxic people thrive in chaos because it clouds your judgment. But silence gives you perspective. It gives you distance. It gives you time to think clearly before you react. And sometimes not reacting is the most powerful move you can make. It tells them you're not easily, that your peace is not up for negotiation. And even if they don't say it out loud, they notice. Oh, they notice. Because your silence is louder than any argument you could have made. It's louder than the yelling match they were hoping for. It's louder than the apology they tried to guilt you into giving. You don't owe them that. You owe yourself peace. And peace is often found in what you don't say. Understand this. Silence doesn't mean suppression. It means intention. It means you are consciously choosing when to speak, how to speak, and if it's even worth speaking at all. It's a choice to preserve your energy, not bottle up your truth. You can still speak your truth, but do it when you're ready, not when they demand it. Speak from strength, not desperation. Toxic people want to drag you into the mud, but silence keeps you clean, keeps you above their storm. And even when they try to provoke you with accusations, with silence, you say, I'm not playing your game. Because you know who you are. You know your truth. And you're learning that not every battle deserves your voice. Some deserve your absence. And the more you master silence, the more peace you invite into your life. That's not avoidance. That's wisdom. That's elevation. Strategy 2, set boundaries like a warrior of peace. There comes a moment in life when you realize love is not proven by how much pain you're willing to endure. That moment is when boundaries are born. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They're bridges that protect your soul while still allowing love to flow when it's real. Toxic and manipulative people hate boundaries because they expose the truth. They were never entitled to you in the first place. When you finally say no more, you are reclaiming your voice. You are drawing a line that says you can't come into my life and destroy the peace I worked so hard to build. It's not about pushing people away. It's about making sure those who stay are capable of treating you with respect. Boundaries are not about punishment. They're about preservation. And if they leave because of your boundaries, they were only staying for your weakness, not your worth. Setting boundaries is an act of deep self-love, not selfishness. It's looking in the mirror and saying, I deserve better, and then aligning your actions with that truth. Boundaries are your personal standards. They are your emotional security system. When someone disrespects them, they're not crossing a line, they're revealing who they truly are. And when you let people violate your peace without consequence, you're teaching them that your soul is a playground for their chaos. But you are not here to be used. You are not here to be drained. You are not here to be emotionally manipulated just because someone else refuses to grow. When you start honoring your needs, your silence becomes louder. Your distance becomes bolder. Your life begins to filter itself, not because you're mean, but because you're clear. And clarity scares those who benefit from your confusion. You don't need to yell to set boundaries. You don't need to argue. You don't need to justify your peace to people who never cared about it. Setting boundaries is often quiet. It's a decision you make without needing approval. It's choosing not to answer the call. It's choosing not to explain yourself to someone who's already made up their mind about you. It's choosing to walk away from conversations designed to trigger your pain. That's power. That's poise. That's peace in action. And yes, people will call you cold. They'll say you've changed. But that's the point. You have changed. You've grown tired of being a battlefield for someone else's unhealed wounds. You're done shrinking yourself to fit into toxic molds. You no longer let your kindness be exploited. Because setting boundaries doesn't make you heartless. It makes you whole. When you were younger, maybe you thought that love meant sacrifice at any cost. You tolerated things that hurt you because you were afraid of losing people. But now you understand, if love costs you your sanity, your safety, or your self-worth, it's not love, it's control. And boundaries are the cure to control. They are your protection against emotional thieves, because manipulators don't need full access to your life to cause damage. They only need the parts you failed to guard. But the moment you say enough, everything shifts. You take your power back. You stop bleeding for people who wouldn't even hand you a bandage. You stop offering explanations to people who only ask so they can twist your words. Boundaries aren't barriers to connection, they're requirements for it. And the people who truly love you will never be offended by your need for emotional safety. There's a certain strength in watching someone push your limits and realizing you no longer have to respond the way you used to. That moment of awareness is when a boundary takes root. You feel it in your chest, calm, steady, powerful. You don't explode anymore. You don't beg. You simply decide, this is not for me. And you walk away, not in anger, but in wisdom. Because real peace isn't loud. It's not about confrontation. It's about walking in alignment with your values. You no longer tolerate disrespect just because you're used to it. You no longer confuse chaos for passion. And that shift, that's you healing. That's you becoming a warrior of peace. People who once manipulated you with guilt, obligation, or fear will try again. But this time, you won't move because you're not the same. And your boundaries will make sure of that. Some people won't understand your boundaries because they benefited from you not having any. That's okay. Let them misunderstand you. Let them call you difficult, distant, or too much. You are not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be respected by those who deserve to stand in your presence. You're not for everybody. And the moment you accept that, you free yourself from the need to please people who are only pleased when you're in pain. Boundaries are how you teach the world how to treat you. They are your silent statement. I matter, my time matters, my mental health matters, my soul matters. And if protecting those things makes you too much for someone, then they were never meant to be close. Because anyone who truly values you will never require you to sacrifice your peace to prove your loyalty. They'll honor your boundaries and be grateful you have them. Strategy 3, learn the art of emotional detachment. Emotional detachment isn't about shutting down your heart. It's about learning how to protect it. It's not about becoming numb. It's about becoming wise. When you deal with toxic and manipulative people, they feed off your emotional responses. They twist your kindness, use your loyalty as leverage, and manipulate your empathy like it's a tool for their benefit. Emotional detachment allows you to take a step back without stepping away from yourself. It's choosing to see things clearly without letting your heart override your wisdom. You don't stop feeling. You stop bleeding for people who never bandaged your wounds. It's the moment you stop needing their validation to feel secure. You're no longer caught in their storm because you found shelter in your own stability. Emotional detachment is a quiet decision to say, I will love myself more than I fear losing you. That's not cold. That's power. That's emotional maturity. You begin to understand that reacting emotionally to every jab, every guilt trip, every manipulative play isn't strength. It's surrendering your peace. Emotional detachment teaches you to respond with clarity instead of confusion. It's recognizing that your emotions are valid, but not every feeling needs to be acted upon. Toxic people love chaos. They pull strings to get a rise out of you, and the moment you explode, they feel in control. But when you emotionally detach, they lose that control. They press the same buttons, but you no longer react. You see through the games. You hear the insults, the false concern, the gaslighting, but you no longer absorb it. You've learned that peace is not found in convincing someone to change. It's found in choosing not to be controlled. That shift is quiet. It's internal. And it creates a barrier no manipulator can climb. You're still compassionate, but now you're protected. The emotional detachment comes when you realize you don't have to argue to be right. You don't have to beg to be heard. You don't have to break yourself just to keep the peace. Emotional detachment teaches you to stop internalizing their dysfunction. You no longer carry their burdens as if they were yours to solve. You no longer lose sleep trying to decode their silence or make sense of their moods. Instead, you create distance, not physical, but emotional, a healthy, measured distance that allows you to love without losing yourself. You still care, but not at the cost of your sanity. You still give, but not at the expense of your self-respect. And when someone tries to manipulate you with their highs and lows, you remain steady. That steadiness is what they fear, because it means they no longer control the rhythm of your soul. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you don't love. It means you love wisely. It means you've learned to let people be who they are, even if it disappoints you. You no longer feel the need to fix, to rescue, to explain yourself repeatedly to someone who doesn't want to understand. That's liberation. You stop chasing closure and start giving it to yourself. You stop needing apologies and start recognizing pattern. You don't invest in potential, you trust in action. You no longer allow someone's inconsistency to shake your confidence. And yes, it hurts. It hurts to realize that someone you once loved benefits from your emotional vulnerability. But what hurts more is staying in a cycle that empties you. Detachment gives you space to heal, to think, to rebuild your emotional foundation. You're not withdrawing love, you're withdrawing access. And that distinction makes all the difference in reclaiming your emotional freedom. Toxic people don't want relationships, they want control. They want emotional access so they can dictate your mood, your thoughts, your self-worth. But when you detach, they can no longer use their silence to punish you. They can no longer use guilt to manipulate you. They can no longer trigger your insecurities to pull you back in. Detachment is saying, I see what you're doing, and I choose not to participate. It's not indifference. It's awareness. You're not emotionally cold. You're emotionally discerning. You understand that you can't change people. You can only change how much of yourself you give to them. You choose your peace over their approval. You choose emotional stability over emotional chaos. And the people who truly love you won't need to control you to feel connected. They'll respect your space, honor your heart, and never weaponize your emotions for their convenience. In emotional detachment, you learn to sit with your feelings without drowning in them. You learn that discomfort doesn't mean danger, it means growth. You understand that your emotions are messengers, not dictators. When you're around manipulative people, they often train you to distrust your own feelings. They gaslight you until you question your reality. But through detachment, you take your power back. You say, my feelings matter, but they don't have to enslave me. You learn to observe without reacting. You breathe before responding. You give yourself permission to not attend every emotional battle you're invited to. And with that, you begin to heal. You begin to choose relationships that feel like peace, not war. You begin to speak gently to yourself in moments where you used to be your harshest critic. Detachment gives you the pause you need to remember. Your emotions are sacred, and they deserve a safe place to land. The beauty of emotional detachment is that it allows you to reconnect with yourself. You've spent so much time managing other people's feelings, walking on eggshells, trying not to upset the wrong person. But now you turn inward. You ask, what do I feel? What do I need? You become your own safe space. You become your own validation. And when your peace no longer depends on anyone else's behavior, you become unshakable. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop loving others. It means you finally start loving yourself with the same intensity. And from that love flows discernment, courage, and peace. You learn to walk away not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring more about your own emotional health. It's a transformation that doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't need to be announced. You just start showing up differently, quieter, stronger, unmoved. And that's when they realize they can't reach you like they used to. Strategy 4, stop explaining yourself to the unworthy. There comes a point when you must stop shrinking yourself to fit inside the minds of people committed to misunderstanding you. Some folks don't ask for explanations because they care. They ask so they can twist your words, reframe your intentions, and weaponize your vulnerability. The more you try to explain, the deeper you fall into their trap. They don't want truth. They want control. You think if you just say it the right way, they'll finally get it. But they've already decided who you are in their minds. And they're not looking for clarity. They're looking for confirmation of their own false narrative. When you stop explaining yourself to the unworthy, you take your power back. You learn to let silence speak for you. You learn that your peace is more valuable than their opinion. You stop arguing with people who measure your worth through the lens of their own brokenness. The need to constantly explain yourself is born from the desire to be understood by everyone, but not everyone deserves that access. You owe no explanation to those who question your heart, but never your pain. You owe no defense to people who distort your growth into selfishness. You are not obligated to make your journey palatable for people who never walked your path. The moment you realize that, you begin to breathe differently. You stop overthinking every move. You stop rehearsing answers to questions rooted in judgment. The unworthy will never see your value because they've already decided what you're not. But their inability to recognize your light doesn't dim it. You're not rude for choosing silence over self-explanation. You're not arrogant for protecting your peace from people who only want access to drain it. You are simply wise enough to stop handing out pieces of yourself to those who only break them. Manipulators often use confusion as a tactic. They'll question your decisions, your motives, your worth, then act offended when you don't provide an answer. But here's the truth. They don't deserve one. Because when someone is genuinely invested in your well-being, they ask to understand, not to accuse. The unworthy don't seek understanding, they seek ammunition. They'll pretend to care just long enough to gather your words and use them against you. That's why silence becomes your strength. That's why distance becomes your defense. You begin to realize you don't have to explain why you're healing, why you're protecting yourself, why you're no longer showing up for people who never showed up for you. Your growth is not a group project. Your healing doesn't need permission. You are allowed to evolve quietly. And the right people won't need an explanation. They'll respect the transformation they can't always understand. You don't have to unpack your soul just to make someone feel comfortable with your boundaries. You don't owe a monologue for why you walked away, why you said no, or why you changed. The unworthy will demand explanations not to honor your truth, but to challenge it. They'll say, "You've changed," when what they mean is, you're no longer easy to manipulate. And that shift terrifies them. They used to control you with guilt, with obligation, with silence. But now you've grown. Now you understand that your truth doesn't need to be diluted for anyone's comfort. You're no longer trying to prove yourself to people who benefit from your insecurity. You no longer lower your standards just to keep toxic peace. Because true peace doesn't require performance. It doesn't need long explanations or emotional labor. It stands firm. It's rooted in clarity. And it walks away unapologetically from anything that demands you explain your worth. When you stop explaining yourself to the unworthy, your world becomes lighter. You stop carrying the weight of their misunderstandings. You stop exhausting yourself, trying to be enough for people who are never ready to receive you. Their confusion is not your crisis. Their disapproval is not your burden. Let them misunderstand you. Let them sit with the silence of not knowing. You no longer owe them access to your thoughts just because they ask. Every time you choose not to explain, you affirm your value, you affirm your growth, you affirm that you don't need external permission to honor your own journey. And yes, they'll call you cold, they'll say you're distant, but that's not the full picture. You're not distant, you're discerning. You're not cold, you're clear. And clarity doesn't entertain confusion just to make others feel comfortable in their chaos. You've learned to rise without an audience. People who love you don't need long explanations to understand your silence. They read between the lines. They feel your shift. They trust your intentions even when you don't spell them out. But the unworthy, they only listen to respond, not to understand. They want access, not insight. And giving them explanations is like pouring your spirit into a broken glass. It never fills them, and it always empties you. So you stop. You stop trying to make your healing digestible for people who only fed your pain. You stop over-clarifying your growth for those who were never there during your breaking. Because the people who matter don't need paragraphs. They need presence. They need truth. They need consistency. And those things can't be faked or forced. You are not here to be everyone's lesson. You are not responsible for their inability to see you clearly. You are here to live in alignment with truth, not approval. You were never meant to be understood by everyone. Some people were only meant to witness your silence, not hear your story, and that's okay. Not everyone has the capacity to receive you. Not everyone deserves front row seats to your evolution. When you stop explaining yourself, you stop inviting people to dissect your decisions. You stop giving critics the blueprint to your soul. And that's when real peace begins. You no longer feel the need to chase validation. You no longer feel guilty for choosing what's best for you. Because worth doesn't have to be explained. It has to be embodied. And when you start living from that place, everything shifts. You attract people who respect your boundaries without needing to debate them. You find peace in solitude because it's no longer lonely, it's sacred. And you finally learn to rest, not because the world understands you, but because you understand yourself. Strategy 5, use discernment, not just kindness. Kindness is beautiful. But kindness without discernment is dangerous. Too often we confuse being kind with being available, being forgiving with being blind, being compassionate with being a doormat. But love is not the absence of boundaries, and kindness does not mean letting yourself be mistreated. Discernment teaches you when to give and when to guard, when to listen and when to walk away. There are people who will see your kindness as weakness, and they will try to drain it, bend it, abuse it. That's why you need discernment to recognize when someone is taking from you and calling it love, when someone is using your empathy as a tool to manipulate you. Discernment helps you see past the smiles, the charm, the sweet words, into the pattern, the behavior, the truth. It doesn't make you cynical. It makes you wise. It turns your kindness into strength instead of sacrifice. Discernment is the voice in your spirit that says, pay attention. It's the quiet tug at your gut when someone's words don't match their energy. It's the inner wisdom that picks up on the unspoken, that feels the hidden motive behind the generous gesture. Manipulative people often wrap their intentions in flattery and charm. They mimic kindness, they pretend to care, but if you're paying attention, their actions eventually reveal who they truly are. Kindness without discernment will have you giving second chances to people who never changed after the first. It will have you excusing red flags because you don't want to seem judgmental. But being discerning doesn't mean being harsh. It means being honest. It means valuing yourself enough to question who gets access to you. Discernment is not the enemy of love, it's the guardian of it. Because real love, real connection is built on truth, not illusions dressed in sweet words. Sometimes the most dangerous people wear the best disguises. They smile while they sabotage. They laugh with you while they lie to you. They play the victim while they manipulate. Kindness will tell you to give them a chance. Discernment will tell you to give them space. And the difference between the two can save your life. Manipulative people count on your good heart. They know your instinct is to see the best in people, to help, to fix, to give. But discernment says not everyone who cries deserves your comfort. Not everyone who apologizes deserves your trust. Because some people only say sorry to reset the cycle. They don't want healing, they want access. They want control. And if you confuse that for love, you'll find yourself stuck in loops, drained of energy, questioning your own sanity. Discernment breaks the loop. It shines light on the game. It says, I see you and I choose me. Discernment shows up when you stop trying to rescue everyone who's drowning in problems they created. It shows up when you stop giving the benefit of the doubt to people who've shown you their true colors repeatedly. Some people aren't confused, they're consistent. Consistently toxic. Consistently manipulated. Kindness will have you making excuses for them, but discernment will remind you that history is not a reason to tolerate disrespect. You're not obligated to keep pouring into people who leave you empty. You're not required to keep teaching lessons to people who refuse to learn. Discernment is the friend that says, you've done enough. It's the shield that protects your spirit when kindness alone isn't enough. Because not everyone is meant to go where you're going. And some people don't want your light. They just want to stand close enough to benefit from it. Discernment keeps that light safe from those who would dim it. Kindness says, help them. Discernment says, help yourself first. There's a reason why airplanes tell you to put on your oxygen mask before assisting others. You cannot save someone else if you're suffocating. Discernment reminds you that self-care is not selfish. It's essential. It helps you identify the difference between someone who's struggling and someone who's scheming. There's a difference between broken and toxic. One needs compassion, the other needs distance. Without discernment, you'll find yourself constantly overextending, constantly explaining, constantly exhausted. You'll keep giving to people who treat your kindness like currency instead of a gift. But when discernment leads, you move differently. You stop seeking validation from people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop negotiating your value just to be liked. You still love, still care, but now you do it with wisdom. You love with your eyes open. You give with intention. You move with clarity, not just emotion. People will try to guilt you when you start using discernment. They'll call you cold, distant, mean, even selfish. But that's because your boundaries expose their entitlement. Your discernment disrupts their ability to manipulate. When you stop giving out chances like candy, when you start asking hard questions, when you stop responding to guilt trips, they feel the shift and they don't like it. But you're not here to be liked by everyone. You're here to protect your peace, your purpose, your calling. Discernment gives you the strength to say no without apology. It helps you separate real connection from emotional codependency. It's not your job to heal everyone. It's not your duty to be everyone's savior. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself is to let go. And discernment gives you the permission to do both without guilt. Discernment keeps you grounded when your emotions try to take the wheel. It reminds you that not every need is yours to meet. Not every cry is a call for help. Sometimes it's a trap. Manipulators thrive in chaos. They exploit your empathy, test your limits, and play victim when confronted. If you don't have discernment, you'll fall for the cycle every time. But when you start using it, you recognize the patterns early. You stop falling for the same lies told in different voices. You stop mistaking drama for depth. And most importantly, you stop abandoning yourself in the name of compassion. Kindness is powerful when it's anchored in truth. Discernment makes that kindness purposeful. You're no longer just reacting, you're responding. You're no longer blindly trusting, you're observing. And from that space, you become unshakable. Not hard, not bitter, but whole. Because the people who truly deserve your kindness will never make you question your worth. to give it. Strategy 6, reclaim your narrative. There will come a moment in your life when you realize the story others wrote about you does not define you. They labeled you based on their limited perspective, boxed you into a version of yourself that served their comfort, not your truth. Maybe they called you too emotional, too ambitious, too difficult, too soft, but none of those labels are yours to carry. When people can't control your power, they try to control your narrative. But you were not born to play the role they assigned you. You were born to reclaim your voice, your identity, your story. That starts with refusing to let their opinions be your mirror. You're not what they say you are. You are who you decide to become. Reclaiming your narrative means digging deep, unlearning their lies, and standing tall in the truth of your becoming, even when your voice shakes, especially when your voice shakes. Reclaiming your narrative isn't about proving them wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were always right to believe in the version of you they tried to silence. Toxic and manipulative people fear the moment you wake up and realize your worth, because your awakening threatens their illusion of control. They prefer you doubting yourself. They thrive when you feel small. So they twist your past, magnify your mistakes, and minimize your strength to keep you questioning your ability to rise. But your story isn't finished. You're not the broken chapter they keep rereading. You are the author now, and your pen no longer writes under their supervision. The moment you reclaim your narrative, you take back your future. You speak truth over the lies they sowed. You stop living on defense and start walking in purpose. You are no longer at the mercy of their narrative. You are rewriting it, line by line. For years, you might have apologized for things you didn't do, explained yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you, and twisted into versions of yourself just to be accepted. That's what living under someone else's narrative does. It makes you forget your own reflection. You play small to avoid conflict. You laugh when you're hurting. You stay quiet when your soul is screaming. But you can't heal in a story that was never written for your freedom. You can't grow in a script that keeps you trapped in shame. Reclaiming your narrative means breaking that pattern. It means going back into the places where they told you who you are and rewriting that with your own truth. You say, I am not too much. I am not hard to love. I am not broken beyond repair. I am powerful. I am worthy. And I get to define myself. That is how reclamation begins. They'll act confused when you stop playing the part they assigned you. They'll say you've changed. They'll call you selfish, distant, arrogant, because your healing interrupts their control. You are no longer the easy target, the silent supporter, the one who took the blame to keep the peace. And they can't handle that shift. But you weren't put on this earth to live in the shadows of someone else's comfort. Your existence is not a burden, it's a blessing. And the moment you stop seeking approval from people who built their identity on your silence, you begin to breathe differently. You begin to live. You stop rehearsing who they need you to be and start remembering who you are. Reclaiming your narrative is messy. It's lonely sometimes, but it's necessary, because peace doesn't come from their applause. It comes from your alignment. And you're finally choosing to live for that, not their permission. You are not the roles they forced you into. You're not the villain in their twisted retelling of events. You're not the savior who has to keep sacrificing yourself to keep others comfortable. You're not the background character in your own life. Reclaiming your narrative means seeing the falsehood in every identity that was placed on you without your consent. Maybe they told you you'd never make it. Maybe they said you were too damaged. Maybe they mocked your dreams and minimized your achievements. But now, you're rising anyway. Now, you're speaking up. And every time you tell your story from your perspective, not theirs, You reclaim another piece of yourself. You validate the pain they dismissed. You honor the resilience they ignored. You don't have to yell to be heard anymore. Your truth speaks for itself. Your life, lived in authenticity, becomes the proof that their version of you was never the whole story. There will be moments when you doubt yourself again, when their voice echoes louder than your truth. That's the residue of manipulation. It lingers. But healing doesn't mean you never hear their voice again. It means you no longer believe it. It means you recognize it for what it is. Noise, not narrative. Discouragement, not direction. You've come too far to shrink now. You've survived too much to second-guess your own intuition. You no longer need their validation to walk boldly in your truth. Reclaiming your narrative is not a one-time event. It's a daily choice. It's waking up and deciding again and again, I am not who they said I was. I am not their projection. I am not their guilt trip. I am free. That freedom may not be loud, but it's powerful. It gives you permission to build your life without their commentary echoing in your soul. People who thrive on control hate when you discover your own voice. They prefer when you doubt your instincts, question your sanity, and rely on their version of events. But you are not here to be controlled. You are here to walk in clarity. And clarity begins when you realize that not every critic deserves a seat at your table. Not every voice gets to narrate your life. Reclaiming your narrative means choosing your truth over their comfort. It means walking away from the roles that never fit and the stories that never honored who you truly are. You were never too much. You were never unworthy. You were simply surrounded by people who couldn't see your fullness without feeling threatened. But now you're done shrinking. Now you're done waiting for them to understand before you start living. Now you're choosing to live out loud, in color, in truth, on your own terms. The second stage of your psychological training must include detailed training in every area. Strategy. 7. Choose distance over disrespect. Every time. There comes a point when you realize that peace is more valuable than being understood, more precious than being right, more important than forcing a connection that drains your spirit. Distance is not a punishment, it's protection. When someone consistently disrespects your boundaries, your time, your energy, you don't owe them your presence. You owe yourself your peace. You see, toxic and manipulative people don't always scream at you. They slowly silence your joy. They don't always hit you with words. They chip away at your worth with passive jabs, gaslighting, and silent treatments. You find yourself shrinking, walking on eggshells, constantly overthinking and calling it love. That's not love. It's emotional warfare. Choosing distance doesn't make you cold. It makes you wise. You're not abandoning anyone. You're saving yourself. You don't have to wait for it to get worse. You can walk away while your spirit is still intact and your hope still alive. Some people will only respect your absence because they never valued your presence. They were comfortable taking from you while giving the bare minimum in return. They laughed at your pain, dismissed your concerns, turned every issue back on you, and left you questioning your own sanity. But now you're seeing clearly. Now you understand that not every relationship deserves longevity. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is create space. That space is where healing begins. That space is where you remember who you were before the emotional chaos distorted your self-view. Choosing distance means you no longer have to justify your worth to those who refuse to see it. You no longer have to explain why your spirit is tired, why your heart is guarded, why your smile has faded. You stop negotiating your peace for temporary comfort and start rebuilding the life they tried to destroy. They'll try to guilt you when you leave. They'll call you disloyal, unforgiving, dramatic. But remember, people who benefit from your silence will always say you're difficult when you finally speak. People who thrived off your guilt will always call you selfish when you start setting limits. You're not selfish. You're sacred. Your presence is sacred. And not everyone deserves access to it. Choosing distance is not about hate. It's about clarity. It's recognizing that respect is not optional. If someone continues to cross your boundaries after being told how it hurts you, they are choosing disrespect, and you are choosing dignity. There's no need to yell, argue, or prove anything. Silence and distance speak volumes. They say, I love myself too much to stay where I am, consistently dishonored. That decision doesn't require permission. It requires courage. And you have it, even if your hands tremble when you walk away. You don't have to wait for someone to hit rock bottom before you choose to leave. You don't have to collect a list of betrayals to justify your departure. One moment of clarity is enough. One deep breath of truth is enough. If your soul is tired, that's enough. Choosing distance is about listening to that inner voice that whispers, you deserve better. And that voice is right. You do. You deserve conversations that don't end in confusion. You deserve love that doesn't come with conditions. You deserve environments where you can exhale. Too many people stay in places that hurt them because they're afraid of being alone. But let me tell you something. Loneliness in peace is better than companionship in chaos. Choosing distance may feel like grief at first. But that grief will give birth to freedom. And in that freedom, you'll find a version of yourself that feels whole again. The danger of staying too long is forgetting what healthy feels like. You start normalizing disrespect. You start adjusting your behavior to avoid conflict. You stop recognizing the manipulation because it's wrapped in apologies and excuses. Toxic people don't always scream. They condition you to accept less while making you feel like it's your fault. But distance clears the fog. Distance gives you the space to feel, to reflect, to reset. You start seeing patterns you once excused. You start hearing your intuition again. You start remembering what it feels like to be emotionally safe. And in that safety, you start to heal. Choosing distance over disrespect is a declaration of self-worth. It's saying, I'm done explaining my pain to people who cause it. It's refusing to beg for kindness, refusing to plead for loyalty, refusing to earn what should have been given freely. It's honoring yourself in a world that often rewards self-abandonment. Choosing distance doesn't mean you stop loving them. It means you start loving you more. It means you recognize that love without respect is erosion. It means understanding that forgiveness and access are not the same thing. You can forgive someone and still decide they're not safe for your heart. You can wish them well and still wish them away from your life. That's not cruelty, it's wisdom. There's a strength in walking away from what doesn't nourish you. There's power in refusing to entertain people who confuse your kindness for weakness. Let them misunderstand you. Let them gossip. Let them spin their stories. Your peace matters more than their narrative. You don't need to convince anyone of your reasons. You just need to be faithful to your truth. And that truth says, I choose peace. I choose distance. I choose me. Not with bitterness, not with rage, but with a quiet, unshakable love for yourself. When you choose distance, you reclaim your energy. You stop leaking your